Dear Laurie, luckily I was, and luckily we were to have our lives together, all 43 years worth, with your tries, and we added two more, a family of five, plus various dogs and cats and one rabbit. I think we had more than one rabbit. Flower gardens, a vegetable garden, even a peach tree. We had 18 years of the old house and pottery with kids in school, music lessons, baseball, soccer, cross country, track, making maple syrup and cider. I was lucky to marry the right artist who made the pottery way beyond what I was able to do. And you worked with special ed kids at the Ridge School, baked bread at the Gray Barn, Epsom. I had finally had enough of pottery. You having quit 3 times, that was that. And we moved up to a new house on the mountain in 1998, away from the busy road. And we were lucky to have 20 years in paradise, finally leaving in 2018. You worked your way up at UNH from the cafeteria to assistant in the director's office at the Earth, Oceans, and Space Institute. After many years at UNH, having finished your degree and graduated along the way, you traveled to Boston for 3 months to earn your teaching certificate for ESL, teaching your Nepali students English as a second language. You did a lot of traveling to Concord and then to Laconia. We were invited to 2 Hindu weddings, and you helped your students write and publish a book of their traditional folktales. We had our good times and our challenges along the way, the best of times and the other kind, for sicker and in poor, plenty of miracles along the way, in sickness and in health, old friends and family and new friends. Friends on Old Mountain Road, friends at the Advent Church and the Northwood Congregational. You helped me many times through a bad back injury and many operations. And I did what I could for you as the Parkinson's gradually worsened. Not fun, but we deal with all the things as they came along with a lot of help from our 3 great kids. We moved across country and that was tough, but we had each other through it all. I was a lucky man to have found the love of my life, all my love, Jeff. Happy heavenly birthday yesterday, April 11th. And she always said she married an older man by 3 months. He'd like you to know that. Charles is going to share a story.
So there were a lot of stories. Let me just first start by just saying how wonderful it is to see all of you here. This is a much bigger turnout than we expected, but it's really nice to be back in Northwood. I haven't been back since my mom had moved back to Seattle, so it's really nice to be back in Northwood. It's really nice to be here in all of your company. So thank you so much for coming. It really means a lot. So a story that my dad had wrote about my mom was when Laurie climbed a tree. It was a cold and stormy night at the old house on Route 4 in a raging ice storm. May have been around 1990. We had gone to bed. Our second floor window looked toward the barn and the sassafras tree. We heard a cat meowing pretty loud, but could not figure what or where that cat was. I got dressed and turned, this is my dad wrote this, of course. I turned on the outside yard light. Instead of coming in at night for some reason, that long-haired cat, she was a Maine Coon, black long-haired cat. She gave us many good litters of kittens. We called her Mama Kitty. Climbed to the very top of the sassafras tree and went around and around, and her tail had frozen to the top of the tree, and she couldn't get free. So this wasn't a nice storm, mind you. I being too heavy to climb up to the top, Laurie said that she was going up. I held the ladder to get her up partway and held the flashlight. She climbed up to the very top with her scissors and trimmed off enough of the tree to free the cat. She carried the cat down and got back in the house, and we all warmed up. To this day, no one knows why that cat went up to the top of the tree instead of hiding under the shed. So that was a great service. What do we want to do now? Someone want to share?
I'll read.
Okay. Pete has some more things to share, and then I'm going to come up and share something, and then we'll invite you all to come up if you'd like.
I remember the story, and I tell the story to my friends that she sawed the cat's tail off. That's how I remember it. My dad doesn't like the dark stuff. I'm gonna read this. I might. Maybe I'll play something. Thank you again for being here today to share this wonderful life together. Today is a good reminder of how beautiful and supportive this community in Northwood has been to each other throughout all of our lives. I've been finding the days and now years since my mom's passing to be filled with more and more vivid memories. At first, I couldn't imagine life without my mom in it. She was always at the ready with her big warm smile, laughter, hugs, thoughtful conversation, humor, and her delicious baked pies. Even when Parkinson's took many of those things away from her, there were still plenty of those moments that shined through. It was hard to see her in that state of mental and physical pain, and I was reluctant to know how I would introduce my new girlfriend, Katie, to her a few months before her passing. But minutes into our visit, my mom exclaimed loudly, "I vote Katie." The rest of our time was spent with my mom insisting on applying some makeup on Katie's face and in return hers. We also sat while she drew our portrait. It wasn't a long visit, but it was a reminder of the essence of who she always was, welcoming to all and always eager to show her love and support. I heard this quote recently that I love from Moon Zappa. When you're really, truly, deeply loved and seen and heard, you internalize that voice. And even if they're gone, you still feel everything is possible because you've been loved so well. I can't imagine being loved better than anyone else, by anyone else. It seemed like loving other people came easily to my mother. Her love, joy, and enthusiasm wasn't delegated to just people. She loved her kitties. She loved her big kitchen counter. She loved keeping her kitchen floor spotless. She loved poetry and literature, Bob Dylan. She told me she really loved Peter Jennings on the news. She loved dark humor, picking us fresh blackberries from the patch in the woods and making us a breakfast of blackberries and cream. She was swimming in Lucas Pond and catching up with the other parents at the pond, while all the kids swam over their heads, calling out for all the mothers on the beach chatting away. She loved baking carrot herb bread. She loved our father, Jeff, even after she yelled at him and said she didn't love him anymore. She always told me that she did. She loved dancing while holding a beer. In fact, she loved to sing about her beer while dancing. She loved the other families in our town and inviting them over. She loved friends, newly born children. She loved hearing that my fiance and I were expecting, and that it would be a little girl. She loved Annie and Troz and watering her garden as soon as she got home from work. She loved waking up early to take photos of the beaver pond and emailing them to me. She loved picking blueberries at the berry bog and strawberries at the strawberry farm. She loved to make them into warm jam that she would let us lick off the mixing spoon. If my mom was anything, she was a compass to show you that there's so much in this world to love, and that it can be so easy to do so. Just let her be your guide. I feel so lucky that she guided me so well. During the months after my mom left her body, the world felt so empty. I would go for walks every day in the woods and find a place to sit in silence, my eyes closed. I could feel her clearly looking back at me when I'd opened my eyes, I swore I caught glimpses of her here and there, behind a tree or just darting away in some big ferns. I thought of her nonstop and felt a big hole in my life since she left. Over time, I've noticed the grief hasn't gone away, but the edges have softened. Now that hole in my life is starting to fill itself in with an infinite amount of loving memories I have of her. Sometimes I consciously sit and just try to think of memories of her, and other times the memories just come flooding back on their own. We carry memories, it seems. It's just that sometimes it doesn't seem like we know where in our minds we left them. I treasure every time I recall memories of her. Something I did not inherit from my mom was her ability to bake. Annie did. Rarely was our countertop missing something that she had just pulled out of the oven. Cookies, rolls at Christmas, blueberry muffins, rhubarb kuchen in the late summer, and again, famous carrot herb bread. or apple pies with elaborate designs in the dough, of flowers, or animals baked in the pottery plates that my dad had made and she had decorated. My mom encouraged us to have pie for breakfast because that's when the pie tastes best. My mom had a great big smile. I certainly inherited that from her, as has my daughter Gracie. Often my fiance Katie leans over to me when Gracie, the little love of our lives, is smiling ear to ear and says, "There's Grandma Laurie's big beautiful smile." My mom my mom wasn't shy about showing and telling you how much she loved you. It's not hard now to feel her love. I still feel connected to it like a thread, and I can still feel it endlessly even though her body isn't with us anymore. I know that she's always with me, with all of us, but now she might just show up in a bite of apple pie, or during a quiet morning walk, or when I'm watering the garden, or when I'm just laughing along to a joke that's a little more on the bad side. I would like us to take a second to think of Laurie and just let a memory or two inside. Maybe it's something that, a chat you had with her, having some food or going for a hike. I know she's very much close by and sending us more than enough love to go around. So maybe if we could take a few seconds just to sit in silence and think about a nice memory. Thank you. I'm going to play something. I wasn't going to, but I did write this for my mom. See if I do playing it. Yeah.
blessed to see all of you in the same room. And I know it would have meant a lot to my mom. She loved this town, her life here, and the people in this community. When I think of my mom, I think about how resourceful and creative she was. She made everything magical when I was a child. She brought my stuffed animals to life with stories she created on the fly. She told me stories of fairies living in the mossy nooks in the woods, which led my imagination run wild. She also told me that the reason my hair was tangled when I woke up in the morning was because elves were tying knots in it while I slept. She created games from scratch for birthday parties and left me notes in my lunchbox throughout elementary school. When I got to college, she sent me the best care packages. She was always making sure I knew how much she loved and supported me no matter what unrealistic plan I was dreaming up over the years. She always made sure my brothers and I had everything we needed, often working multiple jobs to make that happen. She was endlessly supportive of us and truly our biggest fan. Another thing I think about a lot is how she continued to learn and be creative throughout her life. I remember her learning how to juggle one year just for fun. She became an ESL teacher later in life, which would be her last job before she had to stop working. She created a warm, welcoming community in her classroom and treasured the relationships she built with her students, refugees, many of whom were learning how to write for the first time ever. She loved learning about their lives and culture. Even in the last few years of her life, she was learning to play the piano, a lifelong pursuit of hers, and she kept knitting and reading as long as she was able to. When she and my dad moved out to Seattle, I was really reminded how much she loved people. She made friends easily wherever she went. In Seattle, she quickly befriended many of her neighbors, to my amazement. If you know anything about Seattle and the Seattle freeze, you know this is no easy task. She made people feel comfortable and treated them as if they were already friends from the first time she met them. I know it was hard for her to leave Northwood, but she enjoyed exploring the Seattle area, and I'm so glad I got to spend those last years with her. We went for lots of walks, explored nearby parks, got pedicures together, and often visited a nearby art gallery that she loved. I also got to take her to a dance class for people with Parkinson's, and for a while we were going to bingo every weekend, which she got a huge kick out of. She often told me that she missed Northwood and her friends here, but as her Parkinson's progressed, it became harder for her to write and navigate a phone or a laptop. But just know that she was always thinking of this place and the people she knew and loved here. I'm incredibly lucky to have had such an amazing, supportive, funny, and creative mom. I have her memory to guide me and the example she gave me of how to treat people well and how to persevere through challenging times to live up to. I love you, Mom.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you, Annie. That was really sweet. I have some things I also want to share about my mom. We all have so many great memories, so it's a real pleasure to get to share a few them with you here today. Those of you who know me know that I was quite a rambunctious child. So I honor my mom for accepting the task of raising me and something she always did with love. My mom gave birth on the kitchen floor of a small hunter's cabin in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And the next spring we moved into the yurt next door that she and my dad had built by hand out of young trees set with the butt ends up and held in a circle with a cable, so the top of the walls sloped outward slightly. And she peeled the bark off of those trees with a sharpened piece of a leaf spring from a car, the whole time being pregnant with me. She would grind brown rice for my cereal in the morning. She always had a banana for my breakfast. We didn't have a table, so she would spread a tablecloth on the floor, and we ate dinner like that. And sometimes in the summer, she would give me a bowl of fresh picked blackberries with cream and honey on top. And I'd hardly ever tasted anything so delicious. She would give me baths in a yellow plastic bathtub with water heated on the wood stove. One time, one of my aunts was visiting, and my mom was holding me nursing, saying how she's always here taking care of the husband and the kid, and sometimes she just wants to sneak away. I lifted up my head and said, "Sneak away." I went back to nursing. She would go into town sometime and she would buy me a Matchbox car, and my dad, who was a mechanic, I was really into cars, so I would play with it all day long and I would fall asleep with it in my hand. My biological dad, we lost him when I was 4 to fast-acting cancer. So my mom and I packed up our belongings from the yurt and we went to stay with a friend named Richard Emerson, Marrowstone Island, which is out in Puget Sound near Seattle. And there she met my stepdad, Jeff, and they fell in love and decided to get married, and we drove across the country and they got married on the way by my Uncle Tom. And we got to New Hampshire, and even though it took us a little while to get used to each other, I'm really grateful to have had 2 father figures in my life. I'm also very grateful to have landed in Northwood for the most of my young life and through college. And some of my favorite memories are my mom making us peanut butter toast with hot cocoa for breakfast, which we would dunk. And I actually made some peanut butter toast, and there's cocoa back there if you want to try it yourself. It's really good, trust me. And in the morning, she would come down, when I would come downstairs to get ready for school, she had warmed my clothes up on a rack over the wood stove. So I could put on nice warm clothes in those cold, shivery mornings. She got us swimming lessons at Bow Lake. I think my friend Chris and I were there, and so we would spend a lot of happy summer afternoons at the various beaches in Northwood swimming while she would visit with the other moms. In the winter, we would go cross-country skiing under the power lines with Chris and his mom Judy, who's also here, and the static electricity would shock us sometimes through the aluminum ski poles. Despite being an often rambunctious kid and all my friends, like my friend Sean, who's also here, she was always patient, kind, and caring. And she loved dancing. She would play music and get down and do the silliest dancing in her kitchen. We'd call it her kitchen dancing. When she was at the Washington Care Center, which was the first assisted living facility that she went to when it got to be too much just to stay at home with my dad, they had a rec room with a radio, and after exercise class, I would put on some upbeat Latin music and we would move around the room. And so I realized that we could never stop dancing. It's what keeps us young. And it allows our soul's expression to move through our body, and it's what enlivens us. So after my father's passing, I often asked myself, where did he go? But I've always felt the strong impression that he left on me. And throughout my life, I felt his presence vividly, as well as my mom's, since she passed on as well. And as her Parkinson's was progressing, I knew that we were uncertain how much time she had left. So it got me ruminating on the nature of life and death. And knowing what I had known from my father's passing, I remembered that DNA is an unbroken chain, and her consciousness and his consciousness and impressions would always live on in me. So when one takes some time to sit aside the busy activities of daily life, come into a place of stillness, the chatter of the mind quiets, and thoughts of the future and past subside, and the whispers of our ancestors begin to be heard. So while sitting on top of a hillside in meditation one day, I heard my dad's voice in my head, telling me how he's never left. He's always been here with me. And all I have to do is look to the mountaintop and not be instantly transported there, and we will stand there beside each other. So, while Laurie may not be among us, a piece of her lives on in each of us, and all we have to do is remember her and receive the gifts of her presence. Thank you very much. What are we gonna do next here? Fun on program. So, I guess this is a chance when any of you would like to share your memories of her are welcome to come up. We're all friends here, so if you have a little memory or a poem or anything you can think of, you get to share. This is your chance, and so thank you for your.
Just in case.
Here we go. Thank you.
I didn't prepare anything in advance, which I probably should have done, so I had a little index card, took some notes. And the first thing I noticed when I came in here was this sign. Because that really captures who she was. Yeah. She did unto others as you would want done unto you. Here I go. Oops. Laurie was so neighborly and so friendly and so much fun to have on the mountain. When she worked at UNH, sometimes she'd go swimming in Lucas and send me a message, and sometimes we'd just go down there just randomly and go for a swim, and it was really nice. It's one of the places that when you first come to Northwood you discover. You bring your kids down there and you meet people, and it was fun. She also, my random notes here. When she was working at UNH, Laurie's daughter Annie was a year older than my oldest daughter. So sometimes they'd get together, and we had a cat named Thumbs, our orange tabby, that they would have fun putting dog clothes on because he allowed anything to happen to him. Because it was attention, and he loved attention. And he was so much fun, and we had a lot in common that way. We loved cats, we loved to bake, we loved the neighborliness of the mountain. I did bake with her on occasion because as she started getting sick, she didn't want to do things by herself as much, so we'd get together and we'd bake. One time I'll never forget this. She made me the best chicken soup I've ever had in my life. I had been sick, and this chicken soup was just not broth bought at the store and poured into a pot. She boiled the chicken, she let the broth cool, she skimmed the fat, she took all the meat off the chicken. It was the best thing I ever tasted in my life. And I'll never forget the love that went into that. It was just, that was who she was. And we had a lot of fun going down to the beaver pond, and we both were gigglers, so we always found plenty to giggle about. And that's about all I have to say. There's probably so many other things, but that's it for now, so thank you.
I'm Pat Savage, for those of you who don't know me, and I met Laurie. I don't think you know this story, Peter and Charles and Andy. But I met your mom in about 1982. I lived in Barrington, and my husband Jack had a foreign car. I think it was a Saab, and he wanted Automeister to look at it. And we were gonna go someplace afterwards. So there I was with probably 3 kids at the time, and I said, I'm gonna go check out that cute little shop across the street. That looks like my kind of shop. So I walked in, and I was not disappointed because it had that wonderful austere shaker, like the barn board and the pots, just sort of sang a song that drew me right in. But this lovely, lovely lady, was about my age, we were probably in our 30s at the time, she walks through. And it was really, the word that comes to mind is Snow White. She had that porcelain, her whole life really, right? Her porcelain white skin, bright eyes, looking at Annie, bright eyes, and framed with the beautiful dark curly hair. And she wore her hair so much in length to Annie's now. Teresa was just saying you never knew her with long hair, but she did wear it meanwhile. It was beautiful. And she was very reserved, but at the same time very friendly, and we did get chatting. Hard to believe with me, right? We got chatting. But really, she did more of the big reveal than I did because she was newly there. And I could see that there was a sadness about her too at the time. She tells me right away that her husband had passed away. And I believe his name was Carl. So let's do some trivia. Carl, you said he was a mechanic, but wasn't he also a forester?
Yeah, he also,
He was a forester
No,
and then he
cut down
died,
trees.
unfortunately very suddenly from cancer. And that she had this, she called your dad, he's this nice guy. And actually that's all any of us want. Nice guy, and she really landed on the word. And then you came in the room, you were about 7 or 8, and you and my son Jamie were the same age, and there wasn't too much commotion, but you were kind of moving around a bit, and there were pots around, and I was thinking, that's interesting, but she didn't seem very concerned that there were 4 or 5 kids in the shop at the time. But anyways, little did I realize we were gonna become friends, like little did I realize we lived in Barrington, I was gonna move to Northwood. We had one of the lives that you make for life with plan and other things happen. But anyways, we moved to Northwood, and at any rate, Laurie was always to me just heroic. It was just something, I hate to use such big words when we're talking about ordinary things, but I think you kids did a beautiful job of creating the intimacy, but your mom and dad were a big deal. They were a big deal in Northwood. Like, the shop was just a wonderful draw. My own mom from Connecticut would come up and shop specifically. She was an antique dealer and shop specifically at Northwood Potters. And then Laurie came to the Lucas, I was part of the Lucas Pond group with Laurie and other people in the room. And she was very excited because the Shelbourne Museum from Vermont had come and purchased a significant amount of pottery. For any of you who don't know that, but that museum is world renowned for its pottery collection. So that was, your dad was kind of a big deal. He was one of the last of the stoneware potters. And then mom decorated, and like one of you said, I think Jeff said in his letter, she really elevated the whole, and I can't speak to that, but I can believe it because of her talent. And one of my best, most cherished memories of Laurie is we were having a really difficult week. We moved down the street. What could be easier, right, than moving 5 kids and dogs and cats down the street, right? And it took us 3 weeks, and I was lucky the marriage stayed intact, is all I can say. But I came home, I told Laurie, we were at the time working at the Gray Barn. We actually shared a job. I recruited Laurie for that job. We made bread. She made the bread that didn't have holes in it. She was a much better bread baker than I was. But I come home, and there is a beautiful spongeware vase, like this tall, with peonies in it from your garden. And it cemented her in my heart. Now I'm gonna choke up. So that's the way it was with Laurie and I. We didn't see each other every day, but when we saw each other, it was a meaningful connection. We both loved to write, we both loved gardening, we loved to bake. She was a much better baker. I learned so much from her. I still use her challah bread recipe, which was one of my favorites from her. But they were a big deal because the Northwood Craftsman's Fair used to be in their backyard. Where there was splendid apple trees, bearing fruit, because it would usually be in the late summer. And just to see them nurture their own children towards the arts and music and everything was a delight. So they were a pretty big deal. Where do I want to go from there? Hold on, that's why I put notes together. Oh, yes. I loved hearing her stories about the refugees that she was working with. And I think that at some point she was working with people from Bhutan. I'm looking at you because everything is, my own memory isn't that great anymore. And she actually brought me seeds that they had given her. They had gardens at NHGI. They had gardens along there, and they had extra seeds. And so they gave their teacher their extra seeds, which she promptly distributed. She put them in her own garden, and she knew that I loved to garden. So that was really one of the wonderful things that she gave me. I think Laurie and I shared this. We both loved the aesthetic, I'm gonna use the word aesthetic, which is kind of a big word, but I mean it from my heart, the aesthetic of living an ordinary life. Having lost my husband too, it is the joy of everyday living that you lose when you lose your spouse. It's not the big things, yeah, you have all these wonderful memories of having children and whatever, but it's that everyday living, the hugging when you come in, and the cover being lifted off the soup pot and smelling how good it is, and just, I think Laurie really embodied that she loved ordinary things, even though she had a very erudite intellect. And so now here we are, sometime after she's passed, saying goodbye to her. And I know that Laurie had her struggles, but I think that the people with sensitive, caring hearts are kind of given the bigger troubles in life. I've really come to see that. I think that she was an example of someone who carried the burden of her Parkinson's as well as she possibly could. It wasn't easy for her, but I treasure the example that she gave throughout her life of being a caring heart above all else.
I have two stories. One is when my mom was living with us towards the end of her life, Laurie showed up with some hand-picked flowers. My mom had dementia. They connected immediately. And Mom, who didn't remember a lot, always remembered Laurie to the end of her life. And my other story is, I think of her every time I go into Hannaford, because I met her one time in the vegetable and fruit section of Hannaford. You've been there. and we talked, and she said, "Look at this, it's so clean, it's so bright, it's just like a party." That's my memory.
I'd like to share, this isn't. First, I'd like to share a story. Pies have been mentioned a number of times, and not just for this church, but with this community. Pies play a really big role in galvanizing a whole bunch of women. And I suppose Gary, my husband, he made pies too, and some of the men. But Laurie told me a story because she knew we both loved pie making, and I always enjoyed eating her pies. And here in the church, we would often have a lot of wonderful pies. Sarah Shaw, Jane Martin, there's a whole bunch of us. I don't mean to leave anyone out. And I remember when Jeff's mom died, Edith, and as I recall, Edith, my mom was sort of like Edith and being very independent and living, you know, in this little cabin or this little house in the woods, and my mother was like that too. And we were reminiscing on missing Edith and her spirit, and that she was a pie maker. And I remember Laurie saying to me that her last day mustn't have been too bad because she made a pie. So anyway, I wrote this song. It's called "I'll Remember." Patters in the falls into fall. Every single thing you ever said to me matters. Concentric circles of conversation evolve as I walk down this familiar pathway. I think about the things you said, as everything that was green is dissolving into shades of yellow and red. Everything is always changing. They told me that a long time ago. As a child standing in a cornfield, I learned that there were so many different ways you can go. The sky breaks open and the sun is shining. The two crows call from across the hills, an air of mystery still. When I think of you, I smile, and I always will. When I think of you, I smile, and I always will.
This takes courage for me. Well, I'm Teresa and I own a farm called the Starry Farm. So, and Annie fit really well in there. And the way I met Annie was I had adopted this horse that was a definite throwaway horse. You know, everybody who had him in his young life at 3 years of age, gave him up. So when I found him, he was 3 years old and had been in 3 different rescue centers. My vet told me he had followed this horse. Anyway, she came to my back door one day. Now I was from Massachusetts. People don't just walk into your yard there. But she walked into my yard, down into the back of the yard, and knocked on my slider door. And I come to the door. I did not know her. And she says, "Hi, I'm Laurie," and she says, "I made some organic cookies for your horse. Is that okay?" And I was so flabbergasted. I didn't know this could ever happen. You know, how can this be? But she did. She made these cookies for the horse. And anyway, a lot of things like that happened to Atlas, and I think she saw the potential in that horse. she saw the unicorn, like, and she told me about the fairies that tie the knot in his mane. So she liked whimsy, but she saw in us, she saw the unicorn in him, she saw the beauty of that horse, even though he has concave ribs and it was unwanted in the riding world. She gave him all the credit he deserved. A beautiful lady.
Well, back about 30 odd years ago, when new construction came to the mountain, that was of course a great source of concern for the neighborhood in particular.
Laurie?
But putting the best face on things, a cheerful, loving, thoughtful Laurie would walk up the mountain and wave to the contractors. And the contractors would wave back. But then it went on for us neighbors, we had a tepid, controlled laughter. When we found out that the people she was waving to were stealing a pump. So I'm sorry, Laurie, 30 years later, it's still funny.
I'm just gonna fill in a minute for somebody else to come up here and say what they wanna say. So I don't know Laurie very well, didn't know her, our paths were just sort of not quite intersecting very much. But I did get to hear her speak a few times, and I got to speak to her a few times, and I just loved it. It was just didn't get enough, and life was busy. But I just wanted to tell you that she loved her life. I recall her speaking about having Annie in the yard with a friend playing, I think with the cat you put clothes on, and mentioning the lion statue with its mouth open in a frozen roar. And I just loved her touch with words. They're just beautiful. And the other thing I remember, well, aside that she lived in the UP, which I grew up in, so there's that, and we both loved the Lawrence cinnamon buns, was that she spoke of her mom once, and so she said her mom would wear very low cut blouses, and that would embarrass her so much that she'd cover herself up. As an adult, she would not dress like that. She just covered herself up completely, which tickled me. And I think she spoke of Greg going into his room with a guitar and coming out a few years later, being able to play beautifully.
For those of you who may not know me, I'm Peter English. This morning I had to go to Concord. And on the way in, I had an antique tool appraisal thing that I was doing. On the way in, I was wondering what it was that I was going to say, and I thought, well, I can always do a poem. But I was sliding up the road to Diamond Hill Farm, where the tools were. And I was actually going sideways, and I was getting a little anxious about that because the car's coming down the hill. And the radio was on, and Anne Lamont was doing an interview with someone. And she was talking about the grieving process. And what I'd like to share with you is a very short line that she shared on a TED Talk. And they turned the TED Talk on, they kind of interrupted the interview and went to the TED Talk. it is, when all is said and done, and this leads into the fact that Laurie was always a caring person. When all is said and done, we're really only here to walk each other home.
Thank you so much for sharing. Unless there's anything else we can. Oh, sure. Thank you.
I never get tired of this view. You should look at each other. I mean, this is an amazing community, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Look at each other and appreciate who you are, that you're here today. Yeah. Laurie Lalish, constancy comes through daily habits of showing up, contributing, listening, being kind, giving thanks, being gracious with our own frailty and the imperfection of those around us. Constancy is all the little choices day by day and choosing to stay and seek God right here, to stick with each other and remain through the hard. I'm Greg Pittman, and my family, my wife Carla, my son Travis, and my daughter Emily, lived here in Northwood on Harmony Road for about 35 years. And during those years, we had many points of contact with Jeff and Laurie and Traz and Annie and Peter at their home on Route 4, at the pottery shop, at the craftsman fairs, making cider and maple syrup, through this church, and at the Northwood school where Carla was Peter's teacher. That's an interesting story too. Laurie was so proud of each of her children and of the things they pursued and have accomplished in their life. She spoke of you often, sharing what was going on as she traveled about the country and lived in different places. Laurie was the kind of person who would stick with you through the good and the not so good times. In the last conversation I remember having with Laurie, she told me about discovering the blood of the Lamb. Laurie was a spiritual person who was seeking God right here and now. And I am blessed to have had Laurie Lalish in my life, woven into the fabric of my being. Bits and pieces, people important to you, and people unimportant to you cross your life. And touch it with love and move on. There are people who leave you, and you breathe a sigh of relief and wonder if you ever came into contact with them. And there are people who leave you And you breathe a sigh of remorse and wonder why they had to go and leave such a gaping hole. Children leave parents, friends leave friends, acquaintances move on, people change homes, people grow apart, enemies hate and move on, friends love and move on. You think of the many people who have moved in and out of your hazy memory. You look at this present and wonder. I believe in God's master plan in lives. He moves through people in and out of each other's lives, and each leaves his mark on the other. You find you are made up of the bits and pieces of all who have ever touched your life, and you are more because of them, and would be less if they had not touched you. Pray that you accept the bits and pieces in humility and wonder and never question and never regret. Bits and pieces, bits and pieces. Thank you. You're a wonderful community.
Yeah, we'll play one last song, and just wanted to thank you again so much. It's really, it does feel like a big family. I've known all of you since, you've known me longer than I've known you. You know about me. So, yeah, thank you again so much.
It's all good.
Thank you for coming and for helping raise all of us, and yeah, especially it's very much a nice, big, beautiful family here. And stick around, there's lots of food and treats and chatting, I'm sure we'll all be chatting, so thank you again.
see all of you in one room, so feel free to hang out and have some cookies and crackers and some peanut butter sandwiches dipped in cocoa, and a nice little visit with each other. Thank you again, it means so much to my mom and you all.
Thank you for coming back.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Lovely time.